I had a discussion with a few Muslims on objective morality on Clubhouse a few days ago, and it brought some thoughts to mind. I'm going to finish this topic and I'm going to say why it's impossible for Islamic morality to ever be objective and why this claim is so foolish to begin with. I'm your friendly ex-Muslim. I create content on the topic of Islam and the harms of this system on the world. If you're interested in this topic, do subscribe for more hard-hitting responses to the Muslim dawah. By the time I'm done this video, you're going to feel like the idea of Islamic morality being objective is so absurd. Or maybe you already know that. Before I begin, here are a few things to keep in the back of your mind about Islamic morality. Number one, why is it okay to marry one's cousin but not marry one's sister in suckling? Meaning, if a lady had been breastfed from the same woman, even if she's not related to you whatsoever, it is forbidden to marry her, according to a verse in the Quran. There was even an example in the Hadith where a man found out that his wife had been suckled from the same lady and he was forced to divorce her. Number two, why is it wrong for men to wear silk and gold? Number three, is slavery okay? Number four, is homosexuality okay? So keep these questions in mind as we discuss, and the answer to all four of these will become clear. So I'll explain why at the end of the video, and this will show you the critical difference between these two codes of morality. So first of all, we need to define morality. And even this is not an easy thing to define. But let's just say the principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior. The goal, having less suffering, is determined subjectively, i.e., why do we want to have less suffering? But it can be verified objectively whether or not a particular method helps achieve that goal. So when I talk about morality, what I'm talking about is reducing suffering. Suffering is something that everyone instinctively knows. When you look at someone, you can automatically tell whether this person is thriving or suffering. There are a few criteria that we can use, such as health, money, time, love, and relationships. All of these are things that are part of thriving. When you look at an animal that's starving or suffering or sick, you know right away this animal is not thriving. The same way when you look at a little child that hasn't seen his mother and he's sad, well, that's obvious again that this is not ideal, and we can improve the situation by reducing his suffering by reuniting him with his mother. So here's a question for theists. If morality is not about reducing suffering, then what is it about? Everyone has to define morality in regard to something. Is it in regard to well-being? Is it in regard to obedience to a creator? Halal and haram and morality are connected in Islam. Muslims believe that if it's forbidden or haram, that makes it not just arbitrary, but it's for a good reason. Because whatever Allah forbade is out of His wisdom as the creator. And when punishments are stipulated, that means that even more strongly so, this is a bad thing. If that's not the case, that means Allah's commands are arbitrary and meaningless. Islamic morality also seems to cater more to Muhammad's needs than to humanity's needs. For example, banning adoption and making a special exemption to marry your adopted son's ex-wife, which nobody ever used in history other than Muhammad. Not just this, but you will see other examples where Muhammad changed the rules to suit his needs. Changes in rulings during Allah's lifetime. Yes, that's a joke. Allah doesn't have a lifetime. If you look at the Quran, and also previous revelations, we will see a change. In the Quran, the parents and siblings of Yusuf are told to bow down to him. This is considered a bowing down of respect, now forbidden under Islam. Other things that were forbidden for previous nations, like the Jews' kosher laws. There are other examples of things that other religions do that are not allowed in Islam. For example, Jews are allowed to drink kosher wine. I was really surprised to find this because I thought that obviously Jews and Christians must all be forbidden alcohol because Islam is just continuing the same religion. But it's not like that. If you ask Muslims, they'll say, well, they probably corrupted the religion. So let's look at examples where even in the Quran, we can see that Allah actually agreed with these laws and then changed them. Allah cursed the Jews on the Sabbath for fishing. But now he doesn't care about the Sabbath. Isn't that interesting? Is this objective? Is it objectively bad to work on the Sabbath? Or was he just doing this for one particular group of people? And if so, why would he do that? Why would he curse people for doing something which apparently doesn't have any harm behind it, working on a Saturday? Now apparently it's fine. You can work whenever you want. The Prophet said, I have been given 5 things which were not given to anyone else before me. Number 1, Allah made me victorious by fear for a distance of 1 month's journey. Number 2, the earth has been made for me and my followers a place for praying and a thing to perform tayammum. Therefore, any one of my followers can pray wherever the time of prayer is due. So this is something different, he's saying, that wasn't existing for previous nations. You can take some dirt and you can wash yourself or wipe yourself. And this wasn't available for other nations, he's saying. The booty, the war booty, has been made lawful for me, yet it was not lawful for anyone else before me. So Muhammad is saying Allah made it halal to take the booty of war, which includes women and children as slaves, and also includes armor and weapons and wealth and date palms and land and all of that stuff that you get as the spoils of war. That is all halal for the Muslim nation, and it wasn't halal for anyone else. That's interesting. Again, we see a change in Allah's behavior, supposedly. Now, of course, Christians would disagree and say Allah is not the same God, so obviously he didn't change his mind. This is just Muhammad inventing stuff. But I would ask Muslims, why did Allah change his mind so often? Let's look at changes in rulings even during Muhammad's life now. Ali bin Abi Talib reported that Allah's messenger forbade on the day of Khaybar temporary marriage, muta, with women and eating the flesh of domestic donkeys. So forget the donkeys thing. Let's look at the muta. According to this hadith, temporary marriage was now forbidden. Yet to this day, Shia still believe it's permitted, and they quote certain ayah of the Quran in regard to this opinion. Regardless of the fact that these two sects, both Muslim, both reading the same holy book, differ on whether it's okay or not, the issue is that now one of the two consider it forbidden and the other one consider it's lawful. So to the Sunnis that consider it forbidden, again, Allah changed his mind? Here's another example. It says in Quran 2:187, it is made lawful for you to have sexual relations with your wives on the night of the fasts. They are a cover for you and you are the same for them. Allah knows that you used to deceive yourself, so he turned to you and forgave you. So now have sexual relations with them and seek that which Allah has ordained for you, and so on and so forth. So what happened here is that it was originally forbidden to have sex during Ramadan at all. Even when the fast was over in the evening, you weren't allowed to sleep with your wife. But then some Muslims couldn't help themselves and they told Muhammad what happened. Then the rule changed. So Allah didn't realize that the Muslims were going to have a hard time not having sex at night during the month of Ramadan? Or to be a bit more charitable, he knew they would mess up and purposely let them fail anyway and then changed it after? It's getting pretty hard to get out of this looking all too human and man-made. How would you explain this as objective morality? How could this go from sinful to not sinful overnight? Literally overnight. Now, let's look at another major issue. Human interpretation needed. Let's grant that the Quran and Sunnah are divine and perfect and exactly objective. But human interpretation is always needed to make sense of it. What was meant by these words? What was the context? Is it universal or specific? Did it apply just to Muhammad? Or is it forever? This is a huge problem because no matter what, humans will have to interpret this using their brains and their rationality. The only way to solve this issue is if Allah was constantly revealing wisdom to humans. Otherwise, we humans are stuck using our brains yet again. How is this objective? Now, another big issue. What about new situations? What about situations that didn't exist in the Islamic corpus? Even if divine objective morality exists, how do we come about figuring out what God would want for us in a situation that never was described before? Can I call him on the phone? Speak to his right-hand man, Muhammad? No and no. So what do? Well, apparently this is where ijtihad comes in. Ijtihad means to struggle to come to a ruling or understanding. There's also qiyas, which is one of the methods which is used to derive rulings, which means to apply analogy. So no matter what, the morality we come up with will be a process of human effort. It has to be. As you can see, this objective morality is looking less and less and less so. It's very human at its core. But instead of having the flexibility to decide on our own morality based on the situation, we are stuck with this dead weight of 7th century Quran and Sunnah. Everything has to go back to what we are lucky enough to have preserved from what Muhammad did and what the Quran says. Now we get to another issue. Hearsay sources. We have an even worse problem now. Much of Islamic morality is based on hearsay statements of a dead guy. The value is not coming from the purported harms and benefits of what is being discussed, but rather who said it. Someone who had special access to God, apparently. And since this is not something we can verify, would it not make more sense to base morality on harm and benefit rather than what some guy supposedly said in the 7th century? Next issue, new evidence. And what if he discovers something later on that contradicts what we understood about the world, such as beating children harms their well-being, or that cousin marriage has been the cause of much suffering of children in the world today, or that beating your wife is not okay? Well, with secular morality, it's simple. We adapt. With Islamic morality, you're stuck. You see, this can never work. Having a fixed book of 6,236 verses, all of them revealed during the 7th century in Arabia, there's no possible way this can ever work universally and forever. So now, let's talk about the alternative, secular morality. Morality is only objective to the extent that it is an enduring part of humanity as a species, and it is essentially biologically driven. A funny example is a study done by Franz de Waal on 2 chimps where they were paid, i.e. rewarded, fairly for the same task, and they were okay with it. But when one of the 2 monkeys was paid a delicious sweet grape, and the other one a boiling cucumber, the monkey that got the cucumber got mad and threw it at the researcher. He would rather have nothing than get paid unfairly. And this makes sense. If you want to understand how this evolved, read the book The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins. He takes this complicated issue and explains how and why this makes the most sense. In a nutshell, if we didn't evolve to want justice, we would not have survived to this point. Morality then objectively exists as a feature of human society, but is subjective to the extent that it evolves and is refined as cultures move through time and encounter more situations that test different moral scenarios. Religion is part of humanity's moral evolution. It shows humanity's values frozen at that point in time. When you try to understand why pork was forbidden for the Jews, all we have is a bunch of theories. The most popular but least sensical one is that pigs are dirty. This is inaccurate. Realistically, all animals have risks. All animals eat a bit of nasty things, but that doesn't actually affect the flesh. As long as you cook it properly, eating meat can be safe no matter what meat you eat. One academic theory is that chicken was more practical in the Middle East since it not only gives meat, but eggs too, and it requires far less water per pound of meat. Pork, on the other hand, requires much more water and is less practical. So someone banned it and it became codified into law. It makes zero sense today to ban pork, but to eat chicken, cow, beef, camel, and donkey and everything else, but not pork. They all have different risk factors for safety and health, but none is objectively worse than the other. It's not sinful in any way to eat one animal but not the other. That's just silly. Muslims will say pork is inherently harmful. It's bad. It's dangerous. But do people that eat pork live shorter lives than beef eaters? Can we look at Muslim countries and say, oh, look, they all live an average of 10 years longer because none of them eat pork? No, that's silly. It depends what part of the animal you eat and if your macronutrients are balanced and how you cook it and so forth. Bacon, one of the most delicious parts, is incredibly fatty and unhealthy. But some part of the pigs are high in protein and good for you. Personally, I'm looking forward to a post-meat world where we have lab-grown options without the inbuilt suffering inherent to farming animals. Most post-religious secular societies, such as Scandinavia, have a functioning moral code, and not these collective nihilistic dystopian societies as some religious people would claim, and are some of the most happiest countries on earth despite being irreligious. Having God as the source of morality is basically used to add weight and legitimacy to answers to moral questions. Yet even with that, God still gives plenty of space for theists to use their own subjective intellect to come up with moral solutions to problems. So even theists have to admit that for those questions not answered by God in religion, a form of subjective morality exists, as we have already discussed. Secular morality essentially replaces God with the collective wisdom, intelligence, and traditions of human society as the definer of morality, which are shared and validated by its members. Is this an absolute, morally definitive as a deity that has already decided every moral answer? No, but it's still pretty persuasive, practical, and functional based on just how human beings operate. In fact, much of the so-called Islamic behavior in a Muslim society is based on the influence of social wisdom rather than direct appeals to God's moral authority. Secular morality doesn't claim to have all the answers, but its very nature is adaptive and responsive as compared to frozen moral codes. And it's funny, isn't it? The religious belief without the books filled with murder, rape, and pillage, we'd all become murderous, raping pillagers. Now, to end off, let's get back to Islam and I'll explain the 3 examples I brought up at the beginning. Marrying one's cousin becomes harmful if done repeatedly from generation to generation. This is something that can be considered unethical or immoral if you do it fully knowing the harm that can come to your children that are born from this. Yet this is perfectly halal. There's nothing wrong with men wearing silk or gold. There's literally no harm whatsoever. Yet it's haram. Slavery is not okay, because owning people is not okay, and that takes away from their well-being. And homosexuality is okay. It's a personal affair and does not harm others. So why would it be immoral? And lastly, here's a funny way you can take the wind out of the sails of objective morality. If they claim that based on the premise that God exists, that he is a creator, that Allah is that creator, and that he communicated to Muhammad the absolute laws of morality, and that this makes Islamic morality somehow objective and superior to your flawed secular morality, you can claim the same thing. Here's a thought experiment. Flying spaghetti monster is my Lord. He created the universe, and he revealed a personal law code to me, the very same law code that I call humanism. It's now objective. Checkmate, Muslims. You see, it's silly to make such a claim, isn't it? Yet this is the very same claim that theists make. Simple and straightforward secular morality is the way to go. Do you have any examples of Islamic morality that really make you cringe? For me, it's Muhammad banning adoption so that he could jump in bed with Zainab. Post your favorite one in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you appreciate this content, consider joining the team. Link is below on how you can support. You can join the Patreon or leave a one-time donation. Thank you to my patrons for your continued support as this keeps the lights on. This is your friendly ex-Muslim Abdullah Samir signing out.